So I've had this comment like held aside to talk about for a while, and I didn't really know how to articulate my point about fantasy and real life and all of that until now, until this week, when everything is upside down and things are going to get more political and more bullshit than ever. And I do understand what you're trying to say, that fantasy isn't like real life, therefore like we don't necessarily have to think about it like super hard, where it's like, oh, like this can be problematic and we can read it and we can deal in it as critically as we can. And that's what I remember you thinking about this. It has been a little while, and I probably should have responded to this earlier, but like I have like held this aside specifically to respond to you about this. But like I wasn't able to, again, I wasn't really able to articulate it until now, because I truly feel like fantasy, like high fantasy and low fantasy and all of that, it is in a microcosm of real life, because you have to use your real life experiences and your prejudices and everything that makes up you. All of those things bleed into your work. Like there's a reason that like as a writer, there are some times where you will be writing things and there are things in your writing that you would not even confess to your therapist. There are things that if you were sitting in a cell being waterboarded, you would never say the things out loud that end up on the page. And it doesn't have to be nonfiction. It doesn't have to be you like spitting about your life. It's legitimately just your inner psyche bleeds out onto the page. It's just a thing that happens. So like when you're building a world and you are writing a story and you're plotting something out, it is your experiences or your lack of experiences that shape that world and make it what it is. For example, when ACOTAR was being made and Sarah was like, I'm going to reform Rhysand, she didn't go deep enough into the world building to make the economy and the politics of the Night Court make sense. And now enough of us in the fandom, if you look at the Night Court even just a little bit, you're like, oh shit, that's an apartheid state. And considering that apartheid states have been in the news of late and have been relevant to the world stage for like 80 some odd years, and I'm not saying that Sarah went out of her way intentionally to write an apartheid state as political propaganda in her fairy fucking books. Like that didn't happen. But framing the Night Court, like her society of secret good guys, as these people who are like secretly bad guys, but also running an apartheid state, it doesn't speak to her level of knowledge about politics. And no one is saying, and I'm not even saying, that she needed to have an encyclopedic knowledge of world events in order to write her fairy fucking books. No one is saying that. But it's important when you're building your world that you have somebody look at it who thinks a little differently from you and who's like, okay, like maybe, just maybe you wrote an apartheid state and either you're going to lean into this or you're not going to lean into it. But either way, you have to deal with it. So like, yes, ACOTAR is fantasy and you don't necessarily have to think about it that deeply. And the world of Prythian is not real, but it is based in real shit. And the people who write fantasy and the people who write fiction, they are real people, and their lives and their experiences and the things that they value and the things that they don't value and the things that they are afraid of and the things that they're everything ends up on the page, because writing is a brutal look at your soul. And this is true of like every kind of writing. I'm writing a fanfic and like the chapter is coming. Like it's been a long week, y'all. But there are things in there where I'm writing it and I'm like, oh shit, like I didn't know that about myself. Like that's good to know. Let me file that away from my therapist. And I'm sure Sarah J. Maas has also had these moments, in that Aelin, from what I understand, is her first main, and I'm sure there is a lot of herself in Aelin because they look alike. And I don't really follow a lot of Sarah's interviews or anything. Like I'm not like following her social media like that, but I'm sure they have similar mannerisms. Like at least I'm guessing that. And considering how combative like this ship was so far. I still haven't finished Throne of Glass, and Phazan and Nessian and all of that. She clearly likes like a back and forth. Like that says something about her. It reveals something about her. And I'm sure if you read like my Neris fanfic and you saw the dynamic between Nesta and Eris, like you could get a good idea of what I like personally when it comes to these sorts of dynamics. Like it does reveal a little something about me. Like not everything that you write needs to cater to your specific tropes and things that you like, but you gravitate to certain things for a reason. I don't know, man. I think the point is that fantasy in particular, because it is a fantasy world, you are building this world from the ground up. You are essentially the god of this world. And your prejudices and your politics and the things that make up you are poured into this world. Like like in Christianity, they're basically like, you were made in God's image. These characters were made in Sarah's image. And the characters that we write as writers are made in our image. So we have to decide what image is that going to be, and what does that say about us.